Most sales leaders think their forecast is off because reps aren't updating their CRM. But the thing is, your CRM stages are measuring what you're doing, not what the buyer is deciding. Discovery doesn't mean they acknowledged a problem. Demo doesn't mean they're building consensus. Proposal does not mean they've authorized budget. You're tracking seller activity while buyers are making completely different decisions in the background. That's why your 80% probability deals keep slipping quarters. Hey, I'm Marcus Shannon, former #1 sales director at Centos, where I led 110 reps to deliver $195 million a year annually. And today I'm breaking down the advanced framework, the exact buyer stage qualification system that took my forecast accuracy from 60-70% to over 95%. By the end of this breakdown, you'll know the 8 buyer commitment stages that actually predict whether deals close, the disqualification triggers that kill 70% of pipeline, and how to run pipeline reviews that actually move deals forward instead of just updating Salesforce. Let's go and dive right in.
We're going to talk about a framework that will stronger qualify a deal. If you have ever moved a close date, put a 1 in the chat. Don't you dare lie to me. I better see a 1 from everyone in this room.
Never happened. They always close on those dates every time.
They close when I say they're going to close.
Right. That's right.
Let me introduce the man, the myth, the legend. I got a chance to hang out with this person in person just last month at the Totality event with the Sales Rebellion. Marcus Chan, CEO of Venly. Welcome back to the show, man.
What's up, my man? We're going to have tons of fun today for you, me, and hopefully the audience too.
Hey, if we can teach them something and make it a good time, I feel like we've won the day. Marcus, you're doing something with Scott Leese and the Midnight to Millions that's coming up. But Marcus, just tell people what you're doing there.
100%. So my Scott Leese, and a number of other amazing partners, we're partnering up with Sell Better to put on an amazing event coming up in November. So it's going to be a live 24-hour virtual summit. 24 different speakers covering everything from direct sales tactics and strategies to running your organization, scaling your organization, everything go-to-market focus, right? It's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be in November, so you can sign up. You don't have to attend every single session. You attend the ones you want to, but it'll be a lot of fun. I'll be speaking specifically on ramping up your new hires. So if you ever struggle with onboarding new hires and you're like, man, it's taking them forever to close their deal or even get to a point where they're consistent in their numbers, I'm going to break down the exact frameworks that I've utilized to run 9-figure sales orgs so we can predictably on-ramp and get people producing results within 90 days. So definitely sign up for that event right there. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's completely free, and it's going to be tons of fun to be there.
The amount of amazing influencers, incredible talent that is packed into this 24-hour event is remarkable. Again, look for the things that matter most to you and show up to those things. Incredible stuff being done by Scott Leese and the team over there. So much good stuff. This is what you're going to get from Marcus today. Let me just pull up the agenda really quick, and then we're going to get right into this framework. Proven processes. Did your leadership hand you a process and tell you that it was proven to be successful, and yet you missed your number once or twice this year? Right? There might be a reason for that. We're going to talk about it. We're going to give you a framework. Marcus is probably the king of frameworks. If somebody gives him like a strategy or a tactic, he will make a framework out of it. Lickety split so fast. And that's what people grab onto from Marcus. And then, of course, we always hear about this consultative sale. What does it mean? Well, this is something that's going to help you to be even more consultative in those one-on-ones. Marcus, check out who's in the room. SDRs, AEs. I'm actually surprised at the amount of SDRs here. This is a very advanced lesson for SDRs right now.
You know what? They're thinking ahead of the game, all right? They want to get promoted to be AEs and leadership. So
hey,
kudos for being on, I guess. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's real. I'll give it to people. I say all the time, you should learn about the job that you want, not just the job that you have. Okay, 100%. This is the first glance you're going to get at it. We're just going to kind of cover this really quickly, and then we're going to get into the nitty gritty. Marcus, take it away, my man.
So awesome. So first off, I think before I kind of dive into the overall high-level framework, it's important to understand like what's wrong with the current process. And here's the harsh truth that most execs aren't going to admit. And I'll tell you right now, I was guilty for years, right? For years, which is most sales processes that you are taught are designed for reporting and not selling. And here's what I mean by that. Majority of the time, if you look at even your CRM stages, it's stuff like, hey, here's a qualified lead, discovery, demo, proposal close. And obviously yours might have some variations based off your company, but generally speaking, it's kind of that flow. But when you think through, how do buyers actually buy? most buyers, they buy like this internally. If you were to talk to them, they say, okay, first, we recognize the problem. Okay, once you recognize the problem, we got to figure out a solution. Once you figure out some solutions, if it's a complex like organization, I got to make sure people agree with me that we want the solution. So that builds some consensus to it, right? And then ultimately, once everyone's on the same page, do they make a decision? So there becomes a major disconnect in terms of even the CRM stays on what you have been taught versus how buyers actually buy, because you're actually measuring like activity, not progress. You're seeing stuff like, hey, did you do a discovery call? Versus, do you understand the business impact of the specific problem to that stakeholder? So you're like a leader watching this, right? Ultimately, a lot of these processes are building for like CFOs reporting needs, okay? Not actually how you actually sell. So the very elite ones, they map buyer stages, not seller activities. And then define really clear exit criteria, which we're going to walk through today. And they focus on buyer commitment. And ultimately, when your process aligns with buyer psychology, you will see your deals move far faster and win rates improve dramatically too, because you also realize, crap, I'm missing certain things in my deal that I need to do now. And you'll do it far earlier. So let's kind of walk through this overall framework. So to make it very easy, it's called advanced, because this is an advanced framework, but it's also an acronym if you couldn't figure it out by the screens. I recommend screenshotting this. But if you think through the stages of how a buyer buys, first off, they acknowledge the problem. Then it's documented in some way, shape, or form. And then it's validated by the team. So they have multiple people that are validating it. And then it's authorized by the exec. So we have executive sponsorship at the highest level, an economic buyer. And then at that point, they've narrowed to external, realizing that means we need to go external. We can't do it internal. We can't do it by ourselves. We can't do it with an existing vendor. And then once they realize how to do external, they then choose a vendor. And once they choose a vendor, they start locking in the timeline. They establish timeline. When's the exact timeline? And then once that's dialed, then the commercial, the deal terms are been finalized. That's kind of a high level in which we're going to kind of break down in more detail in just a second.
I think I'm guilty of, in steps 1 and 2, happy ears kicks in.
100%.
And this is where it gets like fun, right? I'll skip so many critical steps 100%. Right after step 2. And then if step 3 happens, I'm already in my forecast meeting going, no, this is good. This is closing for sure.
100%. 100%. I mean, it's wild, right? So we'll work with teams and organizations, and I'll sit down with some of the reps and managers, and we'll pull up their pipeline, and they'll say, hey, these are the deals that are most likely to close this quarter, right?
Yeah.
And they'll be like in proposal stage, right? So they already have proposals like, I'm just waiting to get a response back by this date. I'm like, awesome. And I kind of started walking through. I'm like, cool. Do we have a documented issue? Well, I mean, they kind of talked about, okay, cool. Do we have at least 3 stakeholders with PIC, power, influence, credibility, that says a problem? They're like, why like 1? Okay. Do we have the actual, like, is it authorized by an exec? Well, they've been kind of blocking us, etc. And in the whole time, I'm just like, win rate is going down. It's going down. It's going down, going down. But they're so excited about this opportunity, which they have promised to their sales leader. And it's a dangerous spot to be in.
I think they're more excited that somebody's talking to them, not necessarily the opportunity. Or maybe that's 100%. Just me talking from my heart. I don't know. All right, so let's talk about acknowledging that problem, documented issue, and validated by the team. These are obvious steps, and there's probably some language, some way that we go about getting this checkbox checked, so to speak. Talk to me about how this happens in a real-life sales cycle.
Perfect. So the first piece is acknowledge problem, right? So this is one of the most important steps, because this is like a stage 0, by the way. So this is your prospects admitting they have a legitimate problem. And if we take a step back, before anyone's willing to buy anything with one person or multiple stakeholders, they have to admit that it's a problem. If they don't admit it's a problem, it's really hard to sell the solution. Otherwise, it becomes a nice to have, right? So when you kind of think through acknowledge problem, what you want to think through is like, okay, has a buyer verbally acknowledged a specific problem? And you do this through your discovery. So in your discovery, which should be a phase, right? And you and I have done some amazing webinars on the whole powerful framework, right? Yeah. So check out some of the past webinars if you have not seen those, which we cover how do you get really in the weeds about acknowledging a specific problem. So for instance, that might be a question, kind of give you a little softball into it. you sit down with them, the question might sound something like, hey, like, hey, James, like when you take a look at your overall business, what's the number one problem that if you don't solve in the next 6 12 months, you would majorly regret?
Hmm.
So now we're getting like, boom, we're getting right into the pain, right?
Yeah.
Right into the problem. So we're
Yeah.
trying to
If
get
I
really
can't solve my
clear.
churn problem, I'm not going to be in business in 3 years.
Right. So now we're like, cool. Now we're like, okay, now we know it's a problem. So now we can start going deeper into that, right? And what we need to uncover is the high cost and high priority. So if I was to tee a follow-up question, it might sound like, hey, so with that churn problem, I got to imagine you got a lot of fires put out. How high does that rank on your priority list?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll answer that question. I think if you have a churn problem, you probably are going to be out of business in the next 3 years, because once a company churns and you lose that account, the likelihood of them coming back is pretty small. I think you have to work twice as hard. And
Right.
oftentimes you're leaving a lot of money on the table, multi-year contracts and so on and so forth.
Beautiful. So now we're getting that. We're starting to push up the high priority, right? And then also high cost. So even with what James kind of just said right there, we can go even deeper. We can say, so based off what's your current churn rate? Okay, we can start extrapolating out net revenue, retention, and
Doesn't that make it documented? Aren't we like? Isn't that the segue into the?
So you're right. So this is what's beautiful is we start to uncover these key things, right? Which is like we're uncovering a very clear problem. It's high cost, it's high priority, and they're open to exploring to solve it, right? Then it's like we can start to say, okay, cool. We know they acknowledge the problem. Have they documented the issue? So that might sound something like, hey, so James, with this, this high cost problem of this churn situation, I can imagine at one point, perhaps you heard some, you probably discussed it in an executive meeting that kind of led to this conversation today. What did that look like if that did happen?
Yeah. I would tell you that my board members hold me accountable as a C-level executive, as a CRO, as a CEO, when it comes to being as profitable as possible. And we are most profitable at the renewal stage. It takes a lot of man effort and a lot of cost to earn a client in hours worked, legal, procurement, and so on and so forth. We go through this big process. If my board members are coming at me saying, hey, this is not as profitable as it could be because we don't get the renewal, and that's 100% profit when they renew, then we're losing on the margin side, and I'm held accountable. My toes are held over the fire for that.
Amazing. And obviously, we can go so many angles. We can go deep into numbers I want to, right? Start quantifying that pain. But if I want to figure out if it's been documented, I'm like, cool, that sounds incredibly painful because of all the back end churn you mentioned, the impact of the profitability. What's the rest of your org say about this? Yeah. So we start to see like what type of socialization have we seen so far?
I like how you're bringing in the team there so that you can get that validation. That's a nice little seed, Marcus.
So these all work together, which is really powerful, right? Because you might hear like, well, we've seen some memos around, or we've been slacking, we've had some meetings about this, and maybe they haven't documented yet, but maybe we realize they started validating the team. Well, you know what? The CRO is fully aware, the CFO is fully aware, and XYZ is CXO is fully aware. Beautiful. So now we start to realize that, right? And here's the really interesting part is they may be aware, but how aware? So potentially, if you're from a business perspective, let's just say in this type of situation, it hasn't been documented yet, but they've already jumped to validating by team, which is really powerful. So now you, as a sales professional, as part of your potentially next steps, could be putting together a business case for them to help them with writing the deal, right? To move to sell the deal internally, right? So we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but this gets you to this. What happens here, when you understand this framework of advance, you're like, okay, I need to help them socialize this even more. Because I need to meet with other CXOs, if you will. So I'm going to have to write a business case. And you might even ask, hey, so if we were to help solve this problem, sometimes it requires an internal business case to be written to gain consensus across the board. In the past, how have you gotten other initiatives approved? So you'll learn a lot in that state, like a question like that, because they might be like, well, I haven't done before, or, I'm not really sure actually. So then you can make a recommendation and start writing a business case for them to co-write together to move the deal forward.
You might even learn about a blocker there if they're like, oh yeah, I almost bought your competitor, this company, but Rick blocked me at the admin level. And you're like, oh, who's Rick? And now you're into your blocker.
100%.
You know what else I picked up there, Marcus, is that it doesn't have to be currently documented. You could be the catalyst as the seller that earns the documented issue stage, moving to the validation to the team. I want to prompt everybody. That's 3 of our steps here. We're going to move to the next 3. But before I do, I want to prompt everybody. Ask your questions. Okay, Marcus, you ready to move on?
100%.
Right,
100%.
here we go.
Beautiful.
Authorized by executive, narrowed
Okay.
to external. That's the one I'm most curious
Yes.
about because I was very like,
100%.
what the heck does that mean? And then I know the vendor process, but let's get a feel for how the audience feels about that.
Beautiful. So let's talk about authorized by executive. By the way, these all kind of feed into each other, right?
It's
And
true.
here's a really ninja move. This ties into the document issue piece. So let's just say, because you brought up a good point. What if they haven't written an internal statement, right? So here's a super ninja move, which is you like literally you get done. I mean, you've obviously booked a second meeting with them, okay? And in advance, before that meeting, you just write up an executive summary of the problem statement, the impact of the problems, the cost of inaction, what they've tried so far to solve the problem, and what happens if they don't solve that problem. And it's going to be the basis of an executive summary, which then can potentially be forwarded internally. And this ties into authorized by executive, right? Because in the perfect world, we're working with the highest possible level, but let's be real here. That's not always going to be the case. You may not always be able to meet with the economic buyer. So you want to have stuff like a business case that can be forwarded internally to help sell when you're not in the room. So what that means is at this point, the exec is aware the problem exists and there's a mandate to go solve the problem. This is like really, 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 really important. And a lot of
I
people
want to point
miss
at your
this.
words like mandate
Yes.
and authorization. Like,
Correct.
I just want to point at that language. It's not very common language in a salesperson's mind, right?
Correct. 100%. So if we take a step back, here's what most people do is if we can't get the economic buyer, the exec bought in up front, like they're not engaged at all, I should say. So we go through, we work with our champion. We think we do an incredible job. We get the proposal. Now that champion, what they end up doing is they either forward that deck, that beautiful deck you put together for them, and the exec does not even read it, just scrolls to the number, and is like, wait, what? Like this is like, oh, this is $1 million. Now we're out. There's no budget, right? Or they sit down and they try to sell them on the exec on like, here's like the solution we have to do. Look at this fancy, beautiful deck, and they just get shut down, right? And they say it's not a priority.
Yeah.
So if we go back to even the advanced framework, the first step is we have to get them to acknowledge there's a problem. So this also means internally too. So we want to make sure that they are aware, the authorizing exec is aware of the problem. They acknowledge the problem. So if we're in this stage right here, if you're arming your stakeholder or arming your champion, they have a business case that they can sit down and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Exec, here's the overall problem. Here's the impact. Here's what happens if we don't solve it. I'm looking at solutions. Do I have your approval on that? That's powerful because now they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize the impact. You're right. I want to see what the solutions. I want to see what can we do to solve it. So again,
I get this impression like you're pointing to the hole in the bag that things are leaking out of, right?
100%, 100%. I want to. It's at the end of the day when that exec says, "Oh wow, this is a problem," they're more open to go fix it. So I'll give you an example, right? So like we have a small company. It's only a team of 6, right? And my team will come to me and say, "Oh, here's this problem." And they'll make me aware of the problem. They're like, we're going to look into solutions. So I'm already aware of the problem and the impacts first. So then they go and look for solutions, and they already got authorization to go look into it. Or I'll say, no, it's not making a problem, right? But it's so early stages. They're not coming to me and saying, hey, Marcus, here's a software I want to invest into. Here's how much it costs. Can we do it? They're not doing that. That's not the first time. The first time I hear about it, when I know it's a problem and the impact, and I know they're on top of solving it, right? So this is a beautiful stage because this means there's a mandate that exists. The team is assigned to evaluate solutions, which is beautiful. Now, in some situations, you're working with the economic buyer, and you get this earlier on, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So you might have to go backwards still and like get them to really acknowledge the real problems, get things documented still to move down from there. So this is really key. So first is you authorize it. So you want to think through like, okay, like I'm going to back up. The exit criteria to get out of authorized by executive. There's a mandate that exists. That's executive mandate, and there's a team assigned to evaluate solutions. So it's deploy. Sometimes, if you're lucky, they even have a code name for it. They're like, "Hey, this is like Project Churn. Like, we need to solve Project Churn." That's a good sign. That's a really good sign because
if they're naming it, I think you've really hit a nerve, right?
Because this allows you then to write the exec summary or the business case in their language.
Yep.
So this is wildly powerful, right? So okay, so once you're like, cool, we got the authorized by exec, then we go to N narrowed to external.
Yep.
So at this point, this means the committee has decided they need to do an external solution, that they cannot do it internally. Their team
this is
cannot
like
do
it would be too costly to build something internally for
exactly.
this. Yeah.
It's too costly for us to build something internally, or we don't have the people power to do it.
We're too
or
small.
maybe,
Yep.
maybe it's timing. Maybe it's like, for instance, like sometimes it's like, yeah, we could do this, but we have to go and hire 4 more engineers, so by the time we, open job recs, we interview and bring them in, that'll be probably at least, 9 months out, which we're delayed our timeline. So there's impacts to those type of things. So they're realizing, crap, we need to go external. This is a great stage to be in, because if you think about this, our number one enemy is status quo.
Status quo. That's right. We lose more deals to status quo than we do our competitors.
100%.
Absolutely.
And there is a big, omission bias is a real thing, which is, buyers fear making the wrong decision versus, the gains they can gain from solving the problem.
Well, making the wrong decision will get you fired as a decision maker.
That's exactly
right. You no longer have decision-making power.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So to exit this stage, this means they decide to go externally. This is like this is great. So now we're kind of moving forward. It's like stage 4, if you will.
Okay. I did not know what you meant by narrowed to external, but now that you say that, the language makes total sense. Funny how I didn't connect that at first. Like, what does that mean?
Because you're right. Because most people don't think about this, but remember, your number one enemy is they're gonna just do. We'll take care of
in-house.
We'll take care of this in-house. So
this is one of the number one objections. We already have something for that, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So
we built that in-house.
In your discovery, and this is where we kind of use overlay frameworks. We want to uncover what else have we done to try to solve the problem. Hey, so because of X, Y, Z problem, because of your churn problem, what are some things you try to do to solve this problem? So you want to get them to realize that, hey, we tried 1, 2, 3, 4 things. Okay, what happened with that?
Yeah.
It didn't work.
And I guess the only way to really skip the narrowed to external stage is if they say something to that when you ask that question, what have you tried? And they're like, oh, we tried. And then they name one of your competitors.
Correct.
Right now, you can assume that it's been narrowed to external moving forward, right?
Correct. Hopefully. So sometimes what happens is if the competitor did a bad job, they're like, that doesn't work for us. So that we must do it in-house. So that can be, so even they say we've already done it externally and it hasn't really, okay, so that makes sense. So my question might be like, hey, so if that didn't work, how do you know the next vendor you choose is going to work? So now you might start learning about their success criteria. Like, how will you determine that? Why not just do it in-house, right? So for example, even for my own company, right, we work a lot of enablement teams and helping teams just turn the numbers around. I'll challenge them like, hey, why not just like hire more enablement people? Why not just do it internally? Why not just, and they'll tell you amazing reasons why it won't be successful.
Yeah. And, most leaders that are in that, ivory tower looking at the business from the 30,000-foot view, they've got all those little variables in sight. They can rattle those off to you really 100%. Fast. Now, we're about halfway through the advanced framework, and I just want to launch this question because I'm curious about everyone's emotional status in the room. Very emotional person. My empathy bone will not allow me to not ask y'all how you feel. So there it is. I have been through the vendor process countless times. Sometimes you're able to become a vendor with a single conversation. Sometimes you're able to become a vendor by filling out a form and just waiting your turn. Sometimes it's an act of God to become a vendor that is a selected vendor at an organization. Talk to me about C in advanced, chosen as a vendor.
All right, cool. So the chosen vendor is a cool thing, right? Because at this point, if you think from the buyer perspective, they said, hey, we have a big problem. We have documented it. We have executive sponsorship. We know we can't do it internally. We need to go externally. And out of all competitors, we said, we want to go with you. And they'll tell you, like they'll email you, they'll say, hey, we're going to go with you if we can get a couple of things kind of lined up.
Yeah.
This is like a strong verbal, which is awesome. Which is like, this is a progression toward it.
It's like a soft verbal though, right? Because there's an if. There's an if.
There's an if depending on the back end, right? Yeah. So you can get a little bit excited, but not too excited, right? So we're progressing forward, right? So this is really, really, really important. And in order to kind of exit out of this, you have to know, like, did they stop talking to other vendors? Okay. Is the scope you designed fit basically around you? Okay. And we need to also find out what has to happen now to really progress it forward to the next step to have final approval. So you want to start thinking through in order to exit out of this is, okay, cool. You chosen us. Do we have a target implementation date? Okay. Or onboarding date, depending on what you sell. Do we have a timeline based on like business outcomes, right? Do we have milestone dates? So sometimes people use like a mutual action plan, which is great in this type of situation, to help them really see what has to be done. Okay. So that's a great place. And by the way, sometimes I'll say something like what Steve said, which is, hey, we're going to go with you if we get the pricing dialed. That's great. So that means they pretty much have chosen you. Again, doesn't mean it's 100%. This is what I call stage 5. You're getting closer. Yep. Your win rate has gone up, but it's not done. It's not done till they have paid their bills and been a happy customer for a year.
Man, I'll tell you, that is the hardest part. For me, I have learned, and I'm going to have to credit my CEO, Chris Merrill, and Leslie Douglas for this. Both of them have like conditioned in me to not get excited until the paperwork starts. And I feel like that was such a helpful, like, it's all just like talk for now, you know? And that once I set my mind in that motion, it was a little bit better. Look at these results. Half the time people are feeling fairly comfortable in their meetings. I like my 14%. You guys are my people. I never feel comfortable in those pipeline meetings, right? Because you never know like what people are going to ask you, what it's going to be, you know, how you're going to be able to prove something is going to close on a certain date.
Right.
You know, too many variables, right? We're guessing every time. That's how I've always felt. People always talk about motivation, but motivation is up and down and even dies at times. Discipline is more important. Any tips on building a discipline in sales?
Oh, such a good question. And with discipline, I think about oftentimes is discipline doing the hard things, right? And with discipline, I think number one is how do you create the environment for discipline? That's the first piece. And I think about it's kind of like this. If I want to get in really great shape, if I keep a bunch of candy and junk food in my house, that environment makes it really hard for me to, to like stick to how I want to eat, right?
Sing in my language.
Right. If I want to work out more, making a lot of friction to go to the gym also, again, makes it hard. So I want to make this discipline piece be as easy as possible. So to be very specific, let's just say, for example, if I want to get more disciplined with, say, prospecting, right? I know I should do outbound. I know I should do outreach. Well, one of the simplest ways is you just time block on your calendar, right? So you're making sure like you're creating that environment. Okay, time blocking. Okay, every day, 8 to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday is my outbound time. I'm making my calls. I'm sending my emails. That's my set prospecting time. So that's the first piece. The second piece is like, okay, cool. How else can I make the environment easier to do? Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to shut off Slack. I'm going to shut off my email. I'm going to have only my dialer up or my sequencing tool, whatever you use for outbound, or it could be just your phone and a paper list, doesn't really matter. That's all I'm doing. I got my desk completely cleared. I don't have snacks. I've eaten, right? I rested up. I can just tackle it. So I'm trying to create the environment, number one, just to be really successful, right? That's like the first piece. So you create that environment. Then number two is you have to recognize and count those wins. So sometimes it's like the eating clean and working out. You do it for like a week, you probably won't see much change. In fact, you might be like, man, I don't look the way I want to look. Or you're prospecting, like, oh, I really committed my blocks this week, but I didn't see any results, right? But you know what? Did you recognize the win that you created a schedule and you stuck to it? That's big. Just even like, you know what? I had my five 2-hour blocks this week, and I did all of it. Okay, that's a win.
Yeah. All right. I don't think we celebrate wins enough, and I love this 100%. Advice. We're going to hop back into the framework. We've got the two last letters here. All right. So now beautiful. We've gone through the vendor process. We're almost there. We're right to the finish line. These are the things we're actually supposed to be excited about. Is this like are we talking about timeline from start to finish? I feel like when we establish that there's a problem and then we get to the documentation, that's like the ticking clock in my brain. And then this 100%. Is what, like the clock strikes midnight. It's time now once there's an established timeline.
Hopefully, right? So in the perfect world, we have that go live date established. Now you might have already established early on, but how many times has that date moved, right? Because so
shout out to all my date movers.
Happens all the time, right? So like we need to like reestablish. Okay, cool. What's the exact go live date exactly going to look like? Yeah. All right. When that happens, what are the milestones? What are the triggering milestones following that to ensure a really successful onboarding and bringing on that customer as well. So it's really, really critical. So at this point, like this is good. This is good, and this is good for obviously for them because they're actually committing the dates on the calendar, but also for you as well because this is a commitment sign. This is like, yep, we want the people on there, right? I'll give you a really good example, right? You know, we close a deal, you know, a couple weeks ago, and like usually we send the invites for those milestone dates. I mean, their EA was already sending the invites for like on to us. So we're like, okay, we own them. All right, boom, they're already putting. And we haven't got paperwork yet. We haven't got paid yet. Like they're already like that's a good sign, right? So this helps show that commitment internally as well. So and then the way you exit the stages, we have a clear set date. There's a timeline based on business outcomes, and everyone agrees on those things.
Yeah.
At this stage, we're still not done yet. Okay. Then we go into really the last stage. This is like, you know, this is like stage 7. Okay. So this is stage 7. By the way, it says 8 on there because, you know, stage 0 is like acknowledged problem. So like this is like stage 7 in the deal in my mind. I'm like, okay, to get to this point, that means we've agreed to all the commercials. They're good with the overall pricing, the length of agreements, any type of, you know, legal needs that's been adjusted. They're like, we are good with everything. Like, let's sign this baby, and it's gonna hit your inbox, right? At this point, you feel really good. So that means procurement's dialed, legal's dialed, everyone's on the same page. And again, we all have lost deals at the stage, so we can't get too excited, right? So we have to just be neutral and detached. But if we get to this point, advanced, I mean, if you have all those stages completely locked down, you can feel pretty good about your deal.
I love it. And this is the whole framework. Advanced, acknowledge the problem, documented issue, validated by the team, authorized by an executive, narrowed to external, chosen as a vendor, which, you know, can vary in process, established timeline, and then, of course, that magic moment when they sign the deal. This is disqualification triggers. I think everybody needs to be aware this exists. Marcus, talk us through them.
So it's easy to get happy years throughout this entire process. Okay?
Guilty.
Like, I get happy years too. I have to like settle myself down. Like, what's real?
I haven't even used it yet, and I'm happy about it.
Yeah, right. So like you have to have disqualification triggers. And so I think the first piece is number one, even before we go through all this, as an easy action item, hopefully you all screenshot of that advanced framework. But you can take all your deals and run through where am I each stage for each deal? In the A through D, you know, like where am I? And they'll tell you pretty quickly what things you're about to figure out. But there's things you can disqualify your deal with, right? So for instance, they stop responding for over 2 weeks. So you can see it. They're opening your emails. They're responding to things. That is getting worrisome, right? A key stakeholder leaves the company. And that can obviously, that could be your champion. That could be an economic buyer. Very, very, very scary, right? Because I've lost deals because I only had one person in. That person's gone. I'm like, crap. I have to restart advanced over. Like it's completely, it's starting from scratch, right? Budget gets frozen or eliminated. That is a big one for sure. Right?
Yeah, a lot of people hit that button when they need to. Oh, we've had some changes and budget's frozen. I hear that one a lot.
100%. So this is why it's so critical to get to the economic buyer, but then to be aligned to how it impacts the overall company initiatives. This is actually how you extrapolate and create more budget up front. Again, and the way you do it really well is you have to have a really killer discovery, like a powerful discovery framework, which we covered in past webinars.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. 4, timeline gets pushed indefinitely. So it's like, okay, I think we're thinking it's probably going to, I'll give you an example. I got an opportunity, right? We're working the economic buyer, but like things keep shifting. And he's like, okay, I think it's probably Q4. Okay, maybe it's Q1. I'm like, this deal's no longer qualified. Like, I mean,
I've gone ahead and set our opportunity to close loss. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You are now just in a long-term nurture sequence. You know, we can be friendly still, but it's fine. But you know,
DM me anytime.
I don't want to get too excited, right? And if they happen to say, "Hey, I'm ready to go now," and amazing, but I'm not going to count it in my deal. I can't promise in my forecast. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be in my pipeline, but it's not on my forecast. There's a difference.
100%. 5, the requirements change significantly. So that can mean a lot of different things for what they're looking for. So perhaps did a competitor come in and they help them basically rewrite what's the success criteria, right? So that can be very dangerous thing. Like, oh, hey, do you happen to be able to do this thing? You know, like, hey, what made you ask about XYZ feature?
Yeah.
You might begin landmines from your competitors, right? So that can be a worry for sure, potentially. 6, executive sponsors changes priorities. So they completely change everything, right? But so this is why this goes back to my point of when we we are selling our solution, even if it impacts only department head directly, we need to completely sync it to the overall company initiatives. This allows you to maintain that congruency of how we can solve a department level problem that makes the overall. So you always want to take a look. Hey, do we truly align to the right exec sponsors' priorities, or are we getting too low still? So we always want to look at overall high level.
I feel like you're getting into the, let's ask the right questions before we advance a deal to the next stage. But I want you to look at this first, Marcus.
Mm.
Your advanced framework was new to 72% of our
Awesome.
audience. And that's why I wanted to ask that question, because I did feel like it was unique and different than your standard methodologies
Right.
that we see. I like this for like an acid test, the progression test. Talk to me about these questions we should be asking. And also, I'd like to, before we like wrap things up, can you end with like, how does this impact my one-on-one meeting with my leadership? Because I feel like we all come in a little bit unconfident, right? 50% of the room was admitting that, half the time I don't feel very confident coming into these meetings. I really want to talk about how this shifts the dynamic of confidence. Go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. So I think the first piece is, and some people aren't going to like this, but I had a firm belief when someone gives me a forecast, you can be plus or minus 3%. Plus or minus 3%. If your delta is far too high, above or below, that means you don't know your deals well enough, and the number as well. So that's why it's like when you think, and the reason this is really important, okay? This is regardless of if you're a rep, a leader, etc. How you perform impacts your compensation. So if you want to predict your income, don't you want to be better at forecasting your number? And that's really, really important to understand that, because that can really drastically impact your acceleration and how much money you actually take home, especially if you're budgeting for anything in a personal life. Maybe it's a wedding, a home, or kids, school or sports or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah. What's your why? Why do you work?
Exactly. You need to have predictability in your income. So this is not just like, I just need to do it for my boss. This is doing it for you at any level, because the tighter you know your number, the better you can plan ahead for your future. Right. Yeah. So if you want to pull the slide back up, we'll kind of walk through the components here.
Yeah, I love these components because I think these are the gut checks. These are the reality checks for people as they move through a deal cycle, something that might center you.
Correct. So before, and I mentioned before, you see the way you kind of run this, you pull up that advanced slide, right, that you had before, right? And you run through each one like, okay, cool. I believe we're at whatever stage. And you ask, hey, before I move to the next stage, do I have concrete evidence of the exit criteria? We covered a lot today, depending what stage you're at. Can I prove this to my sales manager? Like, and I always think about this, like, if I had to bet my mortgage on it, what would be my likelihood?
That's real. You know what I look for is a screenshot of the agreement that we're moving forward, so that I can send it to my leader.
That's even better, right? So it's like cool. Like, those are the good signs, right? And then 3 is a big one. This is like a litmus test. Would the buyer confirm the status if asked directly? So for instance, it's like, hey, like, if it's validated by team, it's like, hey, so with stakeholder 1, 2, and 3, do they all agree there's a big enough problem to solve? It's a very direct question. If you were to ask them that question, what would they say? And if it's like, oh, I'm not sure, and you might feel you're later in the deal. It's like, I got some work to do. So, and it's okay if you're not happy with the answers to the litmus test, because that means next, what do you do now to go back and solve some of these gaps?
Now, at least 72% of our audience is new to this framework. If you had them coming away trying to use this for the first time, is it a crawl, walk, run? What's the best advice you can give people? Learn what you can from this man. He's a master of his craft. Marcus, final thoughts coming away from the show.
So we covered like a lot today, right? We want to be massively self-aware across the board what stage we're truly at. But let's say this is new to you, right? If we go super simple, super ground zero, think through like, all right, do we have stage 0? Do we have the acknowledged problem? That's one of the biggest things, because if we don't have the acknowledged, it's a big problem, it's high priority, it's going to impact the organization, the rest of it doesn't really matter. So if we can at least start with that piece, then we can start working it in multi-threading, working other opportunities throughout. And if you want to really see, and you can't be like, do you have a problem? Have you acknowledged problem? That's not how you do discovery, right? So if you think through this we talk about a lot of the what today with some kind of seed questions, kind of help you, prompt you. The how to get super tactical, where you're like basically building a business case on call number 0, if you will, is you run frameworks like the Powerful Framework. And you ask them questions in a way that help you quantify the impact so you can help them start building a case up front and they can establish it's a clear problem. Because once they're super sold out it's a problem, it's far easier to sell the solution as well.
I think that's the 1-2 punch that people neglect. We go for interest more frequently than we go for discovery of the problem. Marcus, I want to thank you for spending time with me. As always, it is a pleasure to host you on this show. You deliver so much great value every single time. Thank you for your wisdom, for communicating as well as you do, and for being a part of the fun with the best audience in the world.
So there it is, the advanced framework. 8 buyer stage checkpoints that separate real pipeline from fantasy forecasts. So here's your action item. Pull up your top 3 deals right now and run them through these stages. I guarantee you'll find at least one deal sitting in proposal that hasn't even cleared, validated by the team. That's not a pipeline problem, that's a qualification problem. And now you have a framework to actually fix it. So if you're a sales leader who needs help implementing this across your team, book a diagnostic call below. We'll analyze your pipeline, identify where deals are actually stalling, and build a plan to actually fix it. Now go update that forecast, but this time make it accurate. I'll see you in the next one.